Good morning, this is the morning from the New York Times for Friday, August 7th, 2026. I'm your host, and we've got a packed briefing today: reader questions, a striking analysis on military promotions, a flurry of executive actions, midterm developments, international crises, and a few cultural notes to round it out. Let's dive in. We begin, as we often do, with Curious Minds, the segment where we take your questions to the reporters who can actually answer them. First up, Howard Stone from Boynton Beach, Florida, asks about the Treasury's new gold coin bearing President Trump's face. He thought there was a law against living people on currency. Alan Rapport, who covers economic policy, explains the controversy hinges on whether a coin counts as currency at all. Back in 1866, Congress passed a law stating that only the portrait of a deceased individual may appear on United States currency and securities. The Trump administration is leaning into the argument that a coin is different from paper currency or a security, a commemorative coin, not circulating money. And here's the kicker: it's not even clear who would have standing to take the administration to court to stop it. Oh, and for the record, the coin contains no actual gold. Next, Lucinda Duzin from Glen Rock, Pennsylvania, wants to know what happened to the idea that GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic could treat addiction. Danny Blum, our health reporter on the Weight Loss Beat, says there's been a surge of momentum lately, especially around alcohol use disorder. The Department of Veterans Affairs just launched a trial testing semaglutide, the active ingredient in Ozempic and Wegovy, for people with alcohol use disorder, and she's watching those results closely. A few study results have trickled out over the last few years suggesting GLP-1s can curb alcohol cravings. But scientists urge caution: we're still in the early stages. Kelly Ellis in Denver asks what's going on with the Department of Education. Michael C. Bender, who covers the department, says it still exists, it's just harder to find. Trump wants to eliminate the agency entirely, but that requires an act of Congress, where there's been little interest. His workaround: scatter the Education Department's main functions across 6 other executive agencies. Education Secretary Linda McMahon remains in her job with her top lieutenants, but she operates almost like a contractor now, hiring the Health and Human Services Department, the Treasury, and others to effectively employ Education Department staff and carry out statutory duties. And Jacqueline Kitka from Haverhill, Massachusetts, asks why the U.S. doesn't have a single primary day. It gives a handful of states outsized influence. Katie Glueck, our national politics reporter, agrees. A handful of states have long played an outsized role in determining nominees. The early voting order has been a source of debate and drama, especially for Democrats, who've wrestled for years with how to reflect the party's and country's diversity. As for why no national primary day? Katie turned to Elaine Kamarck, author of Primary Politics and a member of the committee working on the Democrats' next primary lineup. Kamarck says it's a constitutional issue. This started out, and still remains constitutionally, in the purview of the states. In order to get all the states to be on one page, you'd have to have an act of Congress, and Congress has been very reluctant to ever interfere in that. Speaking of which, the DNC just voted to make South Carolina the first state in the 2028 primary calendar, followed by Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Michigan, and Virginia before Super Tuesday. Now, a striking data point from our In One Chart section. A Times analysis finds that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has repeatedly blocked promotions for high-ranking women in the military. This year, the percentage of such nominations for women is the lowest in at least 25 years, just 4%, 8 women out of 201 candidates for high-ranking posts, less than half the average of the past decade. Hegseth hasn't explained why, but he's argued that the Pentagon's past diversity efforts degraded the military. For too long, we've promoted too many uniformed leaders for the wrong reasons, he told military leaders last September. Based on their race, based on gender quotas, based on historic so-called firsts. Let's turn to the latest news from the Trump administration. Yesterday, the president signed 2 executive orders targeting birthright citizenship, one aimed at limiting who qualifies, the other at restricting visas for some pregnant women, part of a crackdown on so-called birth tourism. This comes weeks after the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 ruling, rejected Trump's previous efforts to end birthright citizenship for undocumented immigrants via executive order. Aides say the new orders don't go against that ruling. During an Oval Office event, Trump told reporters the June 30 decision was a very bad ruling, but that these new orders take a different approach. Also yesterday, the administration announced it would move forward with eliminating hundreds of federal regulations governing Head Start, the 61-year-old anti-poverty program for impoverished young children. The plan would remove most of Head Start's 133 pages of federal requirements, math and literacy curricula, class sizes, medical screenings, home visits, even a requirement that children brush their teeth after meals. Administration officials say the changes will save money by lifting onerous requirements. Advocates fear it's a push to gut the program. And a Times investigation digs into how the reflecting pool repairs veered so far off course. It's a story involving a Trump Organization hospitality manager traveling to Las Vegas for a concrete trade show, no-bid contracts, and memes, the untold backstory of a national landmark's renovation gone sideways. On the midterm front, the Times sat down with Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, who won the Democratic Senate primary in Michigan. He discussed the appeal of progressives and, in a moment that made headlines, said his hands were way bigger than Trump's. In Tennessee, Senator Marsha Blackburn easily won the Republican nomination for governor, positioning her to become the state's first female governor in November. And a growing number of local officials who oversee voting are election deniers. Nick Corasaniti, who covers voting rights, explains what that could mean. People like Heidi Stirrup, once barred from the Justice Department for pressuring staff on election fraud claims, now chair of the Prince William County Electoral Board in Virginia. More politics. In a party-line vote, the Senate Homeland Security Committee chaired by Rand Paul held Dr. Anthony Fauci in contempt of Congress for refusing to answer questions at a hearing last week. Fauci invoked his Fifth Amendment right more than 100 times as Republicans accused him of funding research in China that started the pandemic and lying about it, accusations he denies. The vote clears the way for the committee to ask the Justice Department to prosecute. Senator Mitch McConnell, absent for nearly 8 weeks after a health episode, says he's been discharged from a rehabilitation facility and will continue recovering at home during the August recess. On the advice of my doctors, I'll maintain an intensive regimen of physical therapy from home, he said. And Vice President J.D. Vance is using social media to tease and fat-shame his critics. When a conservative columnist criticized his position on Iran, Vance jabbed at the man's physical appearance. If you've ever met him in person, it's quite obvious the man has never missed a burrito. His advisors say he's just being authentic, a departure from the decorum and restraint of his predecessors. Around the world, in Thailand, a student opened fire at a school, killing at least 7 people before shooting himself. The boy had brandished a handgun on Instagram around Songkran, the Thai New Year, and used his grandfather's weapon to kill his grandparents first, then went to his high school northwest of Bangkok. The episode revived debate about gun laws in the country. In Germany, a drone containing an explosive device was found in the freight terminal of Leipzig/Halle Airport, where Ukrainian cargo carrier Antonov Airlines keeps planes. Authorities say a second drone may have collided with a cargo plane in the air after runways closed, causing minor damage. Germany's interior minister interrupted his vacation to address the incident. And the Rhine, a vital transport waterway through Europe, recorded its lowest water levels since 1880 this week. Ferocious heat waves, wildfires, and droughts magnified by climate change have crippled key waterways, disrupting supply chains, adding costs, and presenting fresh risks to a region already struggling with stagnating growth. Long-submerged relics, like a fishing boat wreck from 1996, have been exposed. Back to the Spokane wildfires, the man charged with setting one of 3 destructive fires told detectives he'd started 24 other fires in the last year and planned the arson 2 weeks in advance. Aaron Farinacci, 37, was arrested after a resident reported suspicious behavior. Meanwhile, drones trying to film from above delayed firefighting efforts. Officials had to ground flights for nearly 2 hours as a drone violated airspace restrictions, putting homes in greater jeopardy and preventing thousands of gallons of water and retardant from being dropped. Other big stories: a New Mexico judge ordered Meta to pay $567 million, the largest financial penalty yet in its legal battles over social media harm and addiction, on top of a $375 million jury award from March for misleading users about platform safety and enabling sexual exploitation of young people. The money goes toward a fund to remedy damages. And the failure of a promising heart drug from Novo Nordisk has experts questioning a long-held theory. The drug, ziltivekimab, targeted inflammation, thought to be a cause of atherosclerosis, but was no better than placebo in a large study. Now cardiologists are asking, is inflammation really a cause of heart disease, or just a marker, the way gray hair marks aging? In opinion, Mara Gay traveled across Georgia from an Atlanta suburb to a VFW hall surrounded by cotton fields to gauge how black voters are feeling about the Democratic Party ahead of the midterms. Black turnout in Georgia is essential if Democrats hope to regain the Senate. And Camille Browley writes about the tens of millions of Americans who've received antidepressants since 1988, a new generation now asking if they were ever needed. Morning reads, typhoon names in Asia come from a list of national symbols, foods, animals, local expressions. Coming soon, typhoon dim sum. Hong Kong chose the bite-sized cuisine as its latest contribution. In the Hamptons, expensive retro sweatpants, $168 free city sweats with garish logos have become the unexpected uniform, replacing the quiet luxury of beige cashmere and bleached white jeans. The most clicked link yesterday was about Trump's changing plans for the Qatari jet donated for use as a temporary Air Force One initially destined for his presidential library, now unclear. And Sydney Tall, the social media memoirist who chronicled her rare bile duct cancer on TikTok to more than 1 million followers, mixing anguish, optimism, and wanderlust as she challenged assumptions about how a cancer patient should look and live, died Wednesday at 26. Today's number, 16. That's how many viable viruses an AI created after scientists trained it on DNA libraries. Published in Science, the study marks the first time AI has generated new kinds of viruses, raising hopes for medical advances but also the disturbing possibility the technology could someday invent dangerous pathogens. These 16 didn't threaten humans, but the concern is clear. Sports, Kawhi Leonard of the LA Clippers, already under investigation for payments outside the salary cap, also received millions in a second undisclosed sponsorship deal, according to reporting by the podcast Pablo Torre Finds Out. The U.S. women's roster for next month's FIBA World Cup in Berlin includes 12 players, 7 making their World Cup debuts, including Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Veterans Kalia Copper, Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, Brianna Stewart, and Aya Wilson return. Stewart will become just the third player in national team history to appear in at least 4 World Cups. And in Philadelphia, Louis Kalb, a play-by-play voice for recreational and school league events for over 3 decades, won an auction to join the Phillies radio booth for an inning. He paid about $22,000, called the third inning Wednesday night, and crushed it. The clip went viral. Recipe of the day, tapenade pasta salad, intensely savory, plush with blitzed olives, green beans, and basil signaling summer. Unlike many pasta salads that turn greasy or dry, this one's creamy from pasta water added to the dressing. As the noodles cool in the tapenade, they absorb flavors and some water, leaving just enough to emulsify the olive oil so every bow tie stays glossy. A month at the opera, the Bayreuth Festival, celebrating Richard Wagner, turns 150 this year. Fans from around the globe brave heat, hard seats, and a complex history for a unique music tradition. The music is an addiction, said one fan. You can't live without it anymore. Our drug is Wagner. More culture, Madonna is once again reigning as queen of the club, says Wesley Morris on this week's Cannonball podcast. And the Times brought together 4 artists and a curator to determine the 25 most important sculptures since World War II. The Morning recommends, take a hydration quiz to see if you're getting enough water. Keep cool with portable air conditioners recommended by Wirecutter. Track your stock portfolio with free apps. And take our news quiz. Games, today's spelling bee, yesterday's pangram was catbird. Plus mini crossword, Wordle, connections, crossplay, and strands. Thanks for spending part of your morning with the Times. See you tomorrow.